On the day my husband died, the house was filled with the scent of wilting lilies and cold candle smoke. I sat quietly in the corner, listening to the sound of laughter and casual conversation, mixed with the clink of spoons against glasses. My daughter in law, dressed in a fitted black gown, poured more wine and loudly announced to everyone, "From now on, this house belongs to us. You should move out before we have to make you." I heard my eldest son whisper, "She's right, Mom." Then Amy, my youngest, murmured after him, "You should rest somewhere else." All the eyes in the room seemed to say I was the last obstacle in a game I hadn't agreed to play. I chose not to argue or shed tears. Instead, my fingers brushed over Robert's photograph, the man who had walked beside me through 42 years of life. No one noticed. In the attic, there was a safe. Only I knew the combination. Inside it was something that could wipe them out the moment they believed they had won. If you're still listening, please tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another step on this journey. And if this story has touched your heart, please remember to click like so it can touch more lives. My name is Eileen Turner. I am 68 years old. Throughout my life, I have known only two things: family and work. I was neither particularly talented nor born into wealth, just an ordinary American woman who believed that if you worked hard and kept your heart honest, everything would fall into place. My husband, Robert, and I built our life from nothing. We started with a small house in the suburbs of Seattle, a trucking company that began with just one old truck and three children whom I once believed were my entire world. I spent over 40 years devoted to being a mother, a wife, and the steady support behind the man I loved. I envisioned my later years as peaceful mornings on the porch with a cup of coffee, cherry blossoms blooming outside, and sharing stories of the past with my grandchildren. But when Robert passed away, I discovered that the house built on love was also where they planned to bury me, beneath the shadow of betrayal. They believed I was old, fragile, blinded by maternal love. But they overlooked one important thing. I learned everything from Robert, including how to fight quietly when needed. The funeral took place in the two-story wooden house on the outskirts of Seattle, where Robert and I had personally laid each floorboard and painted every coat by hand. That house had been our pride, home to the three children I raised and the place I had hoped to grow old peacefully with my husband. Yet on this morning, amid the comings and goings, the flowers of sympathy, and the cold handshakes, I understood that the place that once kept me safe no longer felt warm or familiar. Everyone who came offered their condolences, but my children, Mark, Amy, and Ben, simply gazed past me. They were busy greeting visitors and discussing assets and arrangements for after the funeral. Even on their father's last night, their thoughts were already turning to what lay ahead. Vanessa, Ben's wife, took charge of every conversation. She smiled gently and spoke softly, but her eyes remained cold and hard. When Robert's casket was taken out of the living room, I saw them lean in to whisper, and a few words reached my ears. The master bedroom will be ours, and the attic room will face the Petervation garden. Mom can stay there for now until she finds a different place. Dad left a lot behind. We need to clarify everything before someone else gets involved. I sat quietly, holding my mourning cloth. Part of me felt pain, while the rest was just numb. The house was lit by candlelight, yet it felt as dark as the hearts within. After the funeral ended, none of them stayed close to me. Vanessa said goodbye to the guests with a practiced smile, then whispered to Amy, "Call the cleaners tomorrow. Don't let her stuff clutter the place." I heard every word but acted as if I hadn't. That night, I sat alone in Robert's armchair. His blanket still carried the faint smell of pine and light tobacco. I looked around the wedding photo, the lamp he had repaired himself, and the gray safe hidden behind the bookcase, all just as they had been. I remembered Robert's steady voice. "Eileen, if the day ever comes when you're being asked to leave this house, open the third box in the safe." I had laughed then, thinking it was just a joke. But today, as they began dividing things even before he was laid to rest, I understood Robert never joked about this. Near midnight, when the last car had driven away from the driveway, I slipped upstairs. The attic still smelled of old wood. I switched on a flashlight, moved the bookcase aside, and gently pressed a small panel. The safe appeared, untouched, covered in a thin gray dust. I entered the four numbers, 926, the date we met, whispered to me once on our anniversary. The lock clicked open with a dry sound, and my heart fluttered. Inside were not cash or gold, but three thick envelopes. Each bore Robert's familiar handwriting. The first said, "The investment accounts are in Eni Turner's name." The second are certificates of company shares, and the last is an emergency trust that you open when you need to protect yourself. I sat on the floor and carefully opened each one, examining every page and figure. My hands trembled with emotion. The accounts in my name were worth $26 million, accumulated over the years without my knowing. The company shares were transferred to me just before Robert passed away. Everything he had built and saved was prepared not for me to live extravagantly, but to ensure my survival. I folded the papers gently, and tears fell for the first time. Not because of the money, but because I realized the man now in the ground was still watching over me, even from afar. Through the window, I saw light spilling out from the living room. Vanessa was still awake, rummaging through drawers and files, likely searching for something to help her take control of the house. I stayed silent, watching through the crack in the door. Every move she made was recorded by the tiny camera hidden inside the urn on the shelf. Robert had installed it when he first started to suspect her. A strange calm came over me. The cold from the wooden floor no longer made me shiver. I gathered the papers into a leather pouch and locked the safe. Before leaving the attic, I softly spoke to Robert, my voice steady and low. "Don't worry, I won't say a word, but I will make them understand. No one can take what you and I sacrificed to build." I went back downstairs and sat in his old armchair. The pendulum clock struck midnight. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, tilting the candles. In a house once full of laughter, only the wind and my breathing remained, as I felt like a ghost in my own home. At that moment, I knew the victim role was over. I would not leave this house. I planned to let them think I was fragile, sleeping, ready to give up. I would remain silent, so quiet they would become careless. And when the moment was right, when greed revealed each of their true intentions, I would open that safe once more. Not for the money, but to start a counterattack based on silence and justice. The morning after the funeral, the house felt unusually quiet. The flowers had withered, the candles had burned out, and the air carried the damp chill of early November in Washington. I brewed a pot of black tea and sat at the long dining table, where Robert and I used to begin each day with a small laugh and the familiar question, toast or eggs? Now his chair was empty, and I knew it wouldn't be the only thing that disappeared. Vanessa entered wearing a dark silk nightgown, her hair neatly piled in a high bun, holding a stack of papers in her hand. Her expensive perfume filled the room, overpowering the scent of the tea. "I know you're tired," she said softly, as if she truly cared. "So I've prepared some paperwork to make things easier. Just sign, and it'll be simpler for everyone." I took the papers and began to look through them. The bold title read, "Real Property Transfer Application." Her tone remained gentle. "Just for easier management, Mom. You know, after Dad passed away, we need to be listed on the title for taxes and other matters. The house still belongs to you." I looked up at her. I... The pale sunlight from the window fell across her carefully made-up face. Not a wrinkle and not a sign of warmth. I smiled softly. Calm. "All right, let me think it over. I'll sign after 7 days of mourning." Vanessa hesitated, then smiled again, her lips curved, and her eyes flashing with a sense of triumph. She thought I had given in. I watched her leave, her heels ticking on the wooden floor. When the door clicked shut, I opened the packet once more. At the bottom, there was a space for my signature and the trap they had set. I took a deep breath and reached for the phone from the drawer, finding the number for Harold Jenkins, Robert's longtime lawyer, a middle-aged man with steady eyes and the kind of loyalty Robert trusted completely. He answered after 2 rings. I leaned in. His voice was calm, but with a hint of surprise. I simply said, "My condolences." "Thank you, Harold," I replied slowly. "But I need your help. This has to remain completely confidential. I've summarized what happened. Vanessa, the papers, and the warmth that used to fill this house are gone." Harold paused for a few seconds, then said, "Robert told me If you call, it means the ET folder needs to be open. I closed my eyes, my throat tightening. Yes, I replied. Do you still have it? It's here. I will make a backup of everything, move it to a secure server, and send you a digital copy within an hour. But Eileen, be careful. I know you won't leave. I gave a small, quiet laugh. I was once forced out of a place at age 19 when I ran away with Robert. I don't intend to be pushed out again. We ended the call. I stood there, feeling my blood slow down, becoming steadier. I had once been the gentle woman who cleaned up after others' anger. Now I was going to leave the mess behind and let them stumble over it themselves. I opened the computer and logged into the hidden account Robert had set up. The numbers on the screen still felt surreal. Even after last night, $26 million remains, not only in assets, but also representing a husband's trust and vision. I moved a small amount, precisely $1 million, into a personal trust with myself as trustee. The rest I left untouched. Every move was deliberate and careful, and no one in the house suspected a thing. Upstairs, I overheard Vanessa laughing on the phone, probably calling Amy. That's all right, she just needs to sign. It turned out to be simpler than I expected. I activated voice recording through the smart speaker in the living room. Robert had installed it years ago for controlling lights and music. They didn't realize it could record and store every conversation happening in the house, every word, every sneer. I saved it all. Not out of revenge, but to protect myself if they ever tried to deny their actions. In the afternoon, Amy brought me a cup of mint tea and said stiffly, I know you're upset, but you should let us handle things. Dad's no longer here. You need to rest. I placed my hand on the table, feeling the emotional distance between me and the daughter I once held close in my arms. I'm still doing well, Amy. There's a lot I need to secure before I can rest. She avoided meeting my eyes and slipped away quietly. I sensed that behind her concern was another purpose. They wanted to wear me down so they could give up and make this house available for their plans. When night came, Vanessa knocked on my door. Just a reminder to sign soon. The longer we delay, the more complicated the tax paperwork becomes. I nodded softly, my voice barely above a whisper. Tomorrow, Vanessa. I need to rest today. She looked at me carefully, cautious. You're not trying to drag this out, are you? I smiled. You're clever, but being overly clever can be tiring, don't you think? She pursed her lips tightly and left. I closed the door and looked at my reflection. A woman with silver hair, a calm face, and eyes no longer filled with tears, but shining with a different kind of determination. That night, I quickly wrote an email to Harold. I received the files. I wouldn't sign anything, thank you. I added one last line. If anything happens, send everything to the state court. After I finished, I shut down the laptop. Outside, rain tapped softly against the eaves. The wind moved gently through the pines in front, like Robert's steady breath. I imagined him beside me, half smiling, his calm voice saying, Eileen, don't let anyone force you out of the house you built with your own hands. The next morning, the sky was a dark slate color, with clouds packed closely together. Vanessa brought coffee onto the porch, checking her phone while looking at me. I greeted her softly. Nice morning, isn't it? She gave a faint smile. Nice for those who accept reality, Mom, I replied. I still smiled. You're right, but I'm still here. For the first time, she stepped back. Her eyes flickered with something like fear, not at my words, but at the way I said them. No more tears, no more pleading, just a cold, steady calm. When she turned away, I looked out at the yard. Late season maple leaves were scattered on the steps, red and damp. Smoke from the kitchen drifted lightly on the air, the scent Robert used to describe as sounds like winter coming. I understood that life would never be peaceful after that moment, but I also realized I wouldn't leave this house quietly again. I would stand firm in the place they thought I was weakest, because I had nothing left to lose except my self-respect. 3 days after the funeral, I woke up before daylight. Dawn seeped through the blinds, pale as mist. In the quiet house, I listened to the clock ticking and the wind slapping against the window. It was the rare silence I had not experienced since Robert was gone. I poured a cup of black coffee, rested by the window, and let my mind drift back to the early days when everything was simple and all we had was faith. Robert was a truck driver, and I worked in a port office. We met on a rainy morning when his truck became stuck, and I happened to be the only one who stayed to help. No one believed that two people with little to their name could build anything meaningful. But Robert had determination, and I had faith. We borrowed money to buy our first truck and painted Turner and Co's transport with our own shaky hands. Load after load, we drove through the night across states, bills piling high. Those days laid the groundwork for the life that followed. When the company started to make a profit, Robert would say, "Ian, never let money make you forget why you started." He believed that unchecked wealth could divide people faster than betrayal. He was correct. As the children grew older, Robert began to worry. He noticed how Mark talked about shares, how Amy inquired about inheritance, and how Ben would agree all too easily with his wife on everything. I thought it was just a phase of learning responsibility, but Robert saw beyond that. Quietly, he prepared for a day I never expected. Soon, the day when the Ian Turner file would be the only thing standing between me and my own family's greed. He once joked, though his voice was very serious, "I'm not afraid of dying. I am afraid you'll have to ask our kids permission to stay in your own house." I had scolded him for being pessimistic. Now it seemed like a dark prediction. As I looked through Harold's files, I noticed one part still unopened, a separate escrow account at First Seattle National Bank. Its key was kept in a velvet box among Robert's favorite ties. I opened the box to find a brass key labeled Locker 18A and a small note that read, "Only open when the truth must stand with you." That morning I wore a heavy coat and a gray knit cap, then drove into town. The city was still damp from the night's rain, and the wind was sharp between the glass towers. I parked outside the bank, took a deep breath, and went inside. The lobby smelled of fresh coffee and printers humming. A young teller with a polished smile stepped forward. "How can I help you today, ma'am?" I placed the key on the counter. "I need to access a safe deposit box. Number 18. The owner is Robert Turner." She glanced at it and then looked toward a senior manager, an elegant woman with bright, attentive eyes. The manager checked her records and nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Turner, he has given you sole access to it. Please follow me." We entered a marble hallway that led to a hidden vault below ground. The steel door swung open with an echoing sound. The room was cool and well lit, with rows of shiny metal boxes. I inserted the key into box 18A and turned it. Inside was a thick leather-bound file and a folded letter. I opened the letter first. Robert's familiar handwriting appeared. "If you're reading this, my worst fear has come true. I've prepared everything you need so no one can take what we built. Inside this file are contracts for the Turner Realty Holdings portfolio, all in your name. Don't trust tears or promises. Trust ink on paper and trust yourself. Robert." I held the page tightly, feeling a mix of love and anger. He had planned so far ahead, while I had blindly believed our family would always prioritize love. I then opened the file and saw deeds for a major commercial building in downtown Seattle, along with smaller properties around the state. Every document bore the name Eileen M. Turner. When I looked up, the manager stood nearby, quietly and politely distant. I asked, "Have these assets been updated?" She smiled gently, her voice calm but clear. "Yes, Mrs. Turner, everything is fully secured. According to the original documents, only your signature can activate this account." I saw a flicker of respect in her eyes. She had likely seen many inheritance disputes and seemed to understand I was no longer a victim. I nodded and replied, "I understand. I will protect it the way he protected me." Before leaving, I requested an additional clause. Activation only if there is proof of seizure or forgery. The manager agreed and assured me of complete confidentiality. I signed the document with steady hand, my trembling gone. Outside, I paused by the glass doors and looked at my reflection. The light from the towers made my silver hair shimmer like a thin sheet of frost. In that moment, I realized I was no longer the woman being pushed aside. I was the keeper of a small empire, the only one who knew how to safeguard it. That afternoon, I stopped at the cafe Robert liked and ordered an Americano. Sitting by the window as the city hurried past, I held copies of the deeds. in my wallet along with Robert's letter. My hand rested gently over them, and a sense of calm washed over me. Counterattacks don't need loud words. They start quietly, with careful steps, and letting others believe you've already given up. When I reached home, darkness had fallen. The living room light was on. Vanessa and Ben were watching TV. She glanced over, trying to appear polite. "Where have you been all day?" We were worried. I took off my coat and gave a small smile. I simply said I visited a few places, dealt with old business. She nodded politely, though a flicker of suspicion showed in her eyes. As I headed up the stairs, I heard her whispering softly, "She's not as fragile as we thought." On the 30th step, I paused without turning around and smiled to myself. They were partly right. I wasn't weak and I wasn't afraid. In my room, I opened the voice recording app and replayed the conversations I had recorded that morning. Vanessa's voice, Ben's laugh, seemingly innocent remarks, all silent proof only I knew about. I saved the files to an external drive, secured with a password that matched the file name ET file. Then I sat down and wrote the first line in Robert's old contract ledger. The counterattack begins with silence. The ink spread slightly, as if Robert's hand guided mine. Outside, the wind moved softly through the old pines, carrying that familiar, gentle sound. I closed my eyes and felt his breath in each breeze. I knew I was not alone, because even though Robert now rests in the cold ground, he was still fighting alongside me, in a way only a man who loved and planned could do. Since the day I left the bank, I understood I couldn't face them directly. When dealing with people who judge power by signatures, the smartest move is to let them stride confidently into the trap you've prepared. So I changed. I left my phone in the refrigerator, bought a card for Amy's birthday, and accidentally wrote the wrong name, calling Mark Ben during a dinner. Each time, Vanessa watched me with a smug smile. She smirked and whispered to her husband, "Poor thing, she's probably beginning to lose her mind," I heard her say, but I kept pretending I hadn't heard. Every morning, I would search for my reading glasses, even though they sat right on the table. In the afternoons, I would tell the same old story 2 or 3 times, slowly convincing everyone that my memory was truly failing. Amy whispered softly to Vanessa, "Maybe Mom should see someone again. It could be the early signs of Alzheimer's." Vanessa simply nodded, her eyes never leaving me. "Yes, Mom needs to be guided through everything once more." I forced a smile and maintained my role as the forgetful mother. I knew it wouldn't be long before she grew impatient. Sure enough, a week later, Vanessa knocked on my door holding a fresh stack of papers. "Mom, I know you forget things, so I redid the paperwork from before. Just sign here, and I'll take care of the rest." I looked at the page and recognized the familiar header. "Fixed Asset Transfer Application, 43rd Avenue Real Estate," I said. I deliberately squinted, voice trembling as I said, "I remember signing this already, honey." She responded with a gentle laugh. "No, you're mistaken. You signed it, but that was the old version. This one is official." I stayed quiet and took a seat. My hand trembled intentionally, not out of fear. I signed with a shaky stroke that didn't quite reach the signature line. Vanessa frowned, trying to keep her composure. "Mom, you need a clear signature. It has to be notarized." I looked up at her, eyes watery, pretending to be the fragile old woman to the very end. "My signature isn't steady anymore, Vanessa." Her hand paused. For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of boredom mixed with contempt. "Then I'll call the attorney. We'll do this properly with a witness." I nodded slightly. "Fine, I trust you." After she left, I closed the door and turned on the hidden camera inside the picture frame. Robert used to say, "Cameras don't lie." I placed another device on the living room TV stand, aimed at the desk where Vanessa liked to sit. From that moment on, every action and word of hers would be recorded. The truth would reveal itself without my needing to say a thing. Days later, the family lawyer arrived, a young man dressed sharply in a clean suit with a serious expression. Vanessa introduced him with a smirk. "This is Mr. Lawson. He helped Ben and me with a real estate matter. He'll witness for Mom today." I noticed Ben's quick, nervous glance. He seemed unsure about what was happening. Vanessa laid the paper on the table and spoke softly, soothing as a lullaby. "Mom, just sign here. This will keep the house paperwork straightforward later." I picked up the pen and intentionally made my hand tremble. The first signature looked so messy I could hardly read it myself. Mr. Lawson frowned slightly. This signature does not match the specimen we have on file. Vanessa quickly intervened, saying she was old and her hand was weak. It's okay. I lifted my head and offered a faint smile, my voice gentle as a whisper. Yes, my hand trembles quite a bit. I might not even recall what I signed tomorrow. The room fell silent for a moment. I saw Lawson's gaze flicker, and Vanessa pressed her lips together tightly. In that instant, I understood the trap was beginning to close. While they were still fussing over the papers, Harold, my lawyer, had already submitted a petition in the state court to protect a widow's legal property under Washington inheritance laws. I knew because an hour earlier I had signed the power of attorney at a downtown notary's office. At the same time, I sent Harold copies of all the recordings from the smart speaker, discussing forging a signature, encouraging her to sign in front of a witness, and temporarily altering the name to facilitate the sale. Harold responded with a single message: I'll take it from here. Stay quiet. That afternoon, while Vanessa was telling Ben how close she was to finishing, I sat in my room and watched the footage on my phone again. Every smile and word they exchanged became evidence for me. Sometimes my heart tightened, not with anger, but with sadness. They were Robert's children, the ones who once called me Mom, but greed had turned them into strangers. I kept my face steady. Every morning, I still went to the kitchen to make coffee, asking about the weather, the flowers outside, and plans for dinner. I wanted them to think I had given up. That sense of surrender seemed to make them bolder. One evening, I overheard Vanessa whispering to Ben outside the bedroom door. Once the paperwork is finished, she won't have anywhere to stay. I've already arranged for her to go to a nursing home. Just a few weeks, she said. Ben stayed quiet, but he didn't protest. I heard glasses clink and a soft laugh. I simply sat in the dark, watching the nightlight's glow reflect on our wedding photo. Robert's smile brought me a strange sense of calm I can't quite explain. I believed that if Robert were here, he would personally teach them a lesson about honor. But now I will do it in my own way. The next morning, I contacted the bank. I wanted to upload a copy of the estate documents and the asset protection order into their system. If any transfer requests come through, I asked that they be blocked automatically. The bank officer confirmed confidently, yes, Mrs. Turner. Assets will only be released when you come in person with the original documents. I gave a gentle smile. Good, thank you. On the fifth day, Vanessa returned accompanied by Mr. Lawson. She spoke briefly, almost like giving an order. Mom, sign the rest. Don't drag this out. I looked at her, my voice small but steady. Vanessa, are you sure you understand what you're doing? She stiffened for a moment, then answered quickly. I'm protecting the family's assets. I nodded slightly, keeping my gaze steady. Yes, the family. But you've forgotten who built this family. The room fell silent. Vanessa tried to appear calm, but her grip on the file grew tighter. She didn't realize that while she was calling her lawyer, Harold had received an official court notice. All dealings related to the Turner estate were now temporarily frozen. That afternoon, Harold called me, his voice carrying a faint hint of energy. It's done. They won't be able to do anything else now. We just have to wait and see when they expose themselves, he said. I responded softly, thank you, Harold. Now I can go on pretending to be the forgetful old woman. He chuckled in understanding of what I was up to. That evening, Vanessa brought a glass of wine into my room, smiling as if it were an act of kindness. Have a little to help you sleep, Mom, she said. I took the glass, but didn't drink. Quietly, I told her, you've done enough for today, Vanessa. Get some rest. After she left, I poured the wine into a plant. The strong smell told me I had avoided another trap. I leaned back at my desk and added a second line below my old note. When they believe you are weak, that is when you are at your strongest. Outside the window, the rain began once more. Each droplet hitting the glass sounded like a ticking countdown. I felt a strange sense of calm, as if Robert was nearby, smiling as I continued the game he had started. A game of patience, of wit, and of silent communication. A week later, Vanessa sent me a brief message. Mom, there's a family meeting at 6 p.m. tonight. We need to go over assets and management. Please cooperate. Just a few words, but I could sense the arrogance in them. She probably thought I was worn out, that I had given up. I smiled, put the phone away, and called Harold. "It's time, Harold," I said. "Be sure to arrive on time tonight, and bring the original will." His voice was steady on the other end. "I will be there with court officers. Let them reveal themselves." I thanked him and then sat in my vanity. The mirror reflected my face, silver hair, carefully brushed, eyes a little sunken but still bright. I took the blue silk scarf Robert once gave me and wrapped it around my neck, not for appearance, but to remind myself I was still his wife, the woman he trusted until his very last moment. That evening, everyone was there. The living room was well lit, with a long table covered in white linen and chairs arranged in a circle. Vanessa sat at the head, her smile confident as if she owned the house. Next to her was Ben, my youngest, looking down at his phone. Mark, my oldest, sat with his arms crossed and a cold look in his eyes. Amy looked around nervously, clearly unsure, but there because she didn't dare miss it. I entered the room. No one stood up. Vanessa lifted her head and spoke calmly. "Mom, I want this meeting to be open. Since Dad passed away, the paperwork has been unclear, so I brought an attorney to review the terms." She then set a thick file on the table and pushed it toward me. White pages, black ink, and I recognized the forged version of Robert's signature on the bottom corner. My heart sank for a moment, then gradually steadied. I pulled out a chair and slowly opened the file. "How thoughtful," I said softly, just loudly enough for Vanessa to lean in and hear. "Who exactly are you transferring your father's assets to?" she asked, smiling as she tapped her finger on the table. "Not transferring, rearranging? You'll still have your share, of course. But you don't need that much, do you?" Mark interrupted, his voice blunt. "I just want clarity, Mom. This house, the company, the land in Portland, all of it was built together. Dad never intended for you to keep everything." I looked him in the eye. "You're right. Your father didn't want anyone to keep everything. That's why he wrote the will himself, line by line. None of us need to reinterpret his wishes." The room fell silent. Vanessa kept her smile steady. "So do you have that will, or are you just saying it?" I placed both hands on the table, my voice still calm. "I don't need to bring it. Someone else will." At that moment, the doorbell rang. Vanessa frowned and turned to Ben. "Go see who it is." Ben opened the door. On the porch, Harold stepped inside, accompanied by two uniformed court officers. He nodded politely to me before facing everyone in the room. "Good evening. I'm Harold Jenkins, legal representative for Mrs. Eileen Turner, widow of Mr. Robert Turner. I am here to clarify certain documents related to the estate." The atmosphere immediately grew heavier. Vanessa paused, her face paling for a moment. Then she steadied herself. "Oh, so Mom has her own lawyer. Good. We all want transparency." Harold placed his case on the table and pulled out a sealed envelope stamped in blue by the court. "This is the original will of Mr. Robert Turner, filed with the county court 18 months before his passing. As requested by Mrs. Eileen, I will read it here." Vanessa was about to speak, but I signaled her to remain silent. Harold carefully opened the envelope, laid out the document, and read slowly and clearly. "I, Robert Turner, being of sound mind, voluntarily execute this will. All assets, including real estate, shares of Turner & Co., and related intellectual property shall belong to my wife, Eileen Turner, until her death. After her passing, my children Mark, Benjamin, and Amy will share these assets equally. While Eileen is alive, no one is allowed to transfer, pledge, or interfere with these assets in any way. Violations will be prosecuted according to the law." The room became completely silent. I could hear the steady ticking of the wall clock. Mark was the first to speak, slamming his hand on the table and rising quickly to his feet. "No way. You manipulated my father into signing this," he said. I looked at my oldest son, the boy who once spent hours in the garage with Robert, learning to repair trucks, and a cold feeling of pain washed over me. "Your father was the one person who truly understood me," I said calmly, "and he knew exactly what he was doing." Harold pointed to the file Vanessa had brought. "And this," he said, is a forged collection of documents showing altered signatures and a copied notary seal. The officers will take it for investigation. A court officer wearing gloves lifted the stack from the table. Vanessa suddenly stood up, her voice trembling. No, I was just trying to make things official. I didn't do anything wrong. Harold looked at her with a cold gaze, tinged with a bit of pity. You were wrong the moment you thought you could outsmart the law. Vanessa turned toward me, tears beginning to fall. Mom, I'm sorry. I was just scared I might lose everything. I stood and faced her, speaking gently but firmly. You're not afraid of losing Vanessa. You're afraid there isn't enough. That's what brought you here. Amy started crying, and Ben simply lowered his head. Mark leaned back in his chair, pressing his fingertips to his temples. I looked around the room, the place that used to feel like our family circle, and saw it had turned into a courtroom hidden away underground. As the officers departed and Harold gathered the papers, I said my final words. Calm but final. Everything you once had, I have taken back. I didn't say it with anger, but with certainty. No one responded. Vanessa simply sat there, her face drained and her eyes empty. When they left, the house fell silent once more. The sound of the door closing felt like a period at the end of a long chapter. I stood by the window and watched yellow maple leaves drift down onto the porch. I wasn't angry. I felt empty, as if reclaiming justice had also cost me something I couldn't quite name. Harold came to my side, his voice soft and gentle. You've won, Eileen. I slightly shook my head. No, Harold, I didn't win. I only kept what was never meant to be taken from me. In that quiet room, everyone remained still, not out of fear, but because the truth had finally been revealed. I'm simply curious, which hurts more, being betrayed or pretending to forgive? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what your heart would choose. He nodded, his gaze distant. Robert would be proud of you. I offered a small smile, though I felt a slight tremor in it. After Harold left, I remained alone in the spacious house. Sunset cast a warm glow over our old wedding photo, where Robert's gentle smile seemed to reach across the years. I quietly whispered as if speaking directly to him, We did it, Robert. So why does it hurt so much? I sat down, clutching the blue silk scarf at my neck. In this room, which felt both like a battlefield and a safe haven, I realized that some victories do not bring happiness. Instead, they bring quiet resolution. A slow, calming melody played, allowing me to finally listen to my own heartbeat. In that stillness, I knew this struggle wasn't finished. Vanessa might cry today, but her tears weren't born from regret, they were part of her strategy. I tightened my grip on Robert's photo and softly whispered, If they haven't learned their lesson, my love, then I will teach it again, but this time without tears. The next morning, the house was unexpectedly quiet. No more Vanessa's tinkling laughter from the kitchen. No more the pre-wedding coffee she used to pretend was kindness. Only the clock's steady ticking echoed through the space, cold and unchanging, as if time itself was waiting to see what I would do next. I stood by the window, watching dew droplets cling to the glass. December in Seattle appeared dull and gray. A gentle rain drizzled down, like tangled threads of silver. I understood that today had to start. If I delayed even one more day, their chaos would swirl around me once again. I picked up the phone and called Harold, speaking with steady confidence. It's time for phase 2. He responded quickly and clearly. The security team will begin this morning. Everything is prepared. They'll arrive within 2 hours. I slipped on a long coat and tied my hair back. It had been a long time since I felt this peaceful. Perhaps because the fear had left me. When faith is shattered, you either fall apart or become something unbreakable. I chose the latter. By around 9 o'clock, 2 black SUVs arrived outside. A team of professional security personnel stepped out, carrying tool cases and laptops. The woman named Lita, with short hair, smiled warmly at me. We are here to change all the locks, reset safe codes, and install a new surveillance system, Mrs. Turner. I nodded and pushed open the gate. Get to work. Treat this place as if it were your own home. Within 3 hours, every lock in the house was changed: front, side, garage, the safe, and even the storage room where Vanessa kept the key. I installed two porch cameras and a motion sensor system that connected directly to my phone and Harold's. Partway through, Vanessa came back and stopped abruptly in the driveway, visibly stunned. "What is this? Who authorized these people to come into my house?" she asked. I stepped onto the porch, speaking softly and calmly. "My house, Vanessa. And from today, I am the only one with the keys." Her mouth opened in surprise, her voice trembling. "Mom, you can't do this." I met her gaze and replied, "I can, and I just did." She turned away to make calls, but her phone had no access. All Wi Fi and internal permissions had been reset that morning. Harold's team had taken care of it from their office. By midday, notices from Turner and Co. began circulating within the company. HR received an official statement from the court and Jenkins Law. All transactions and provisional authority under Vanessa Turner Holdings are now permanently frozen. Mrs. Eileen Turner steps back into the role of honorary chair and official financial supporter. As that email was sent out to everyone in the company, I was sitting in Robert's office. The old leather chair had worn patches on the arms from years of use. The desk still bore tiny scratches from his pencil tapping when he was deep in thought. I opened the window to breathe in the cold air and listen to dry leaves swirling in the yard. For the first time in many years, I felt truly connected to myself again. Within a day, every account linked to Vanessa Turner Holdings was frozen. Bank transfers, advertising expenses, company credit cards, all of it locked down. Vanessa reached out first to the accountant, then to Ben, and finally to Mark. But no one could help. I knew because Harold had forwarded me copies of their messages, filled with panic, blame, and curses. Vanessa wrote, "She can't do this." I thought to myself, "Yes, I can." And I smiled. On the second day, I managed to clear out the remaining chaos. I instructed the company to replace the entire financial advisory team and to end the arrangements with the firm Vanessa had been using. Everything she had managed now reverted to me. Mark came by, looking worn out, his voice soft. "Mom, I didn't realize it would go this far." Vanessa told me she just wanted to help temporarily. I looked at my firstborn, the boy who once shuffled through the garage in worn shoes alongside his dad. Now his eyes reflected regret. "You don't need to lie anymore, Mark," I said softly. "The worst thing isn't greed. It's letting someone else do your thinking for you." He lowered his head. "I'm sorry, Ben was different. He still stood by his wife, at least on the surface. When he found out the joint account was frozen, he slammed the table. 'You're destroying our family.' I looked at my son, not with anger, but with sadness. 'No, Ben, I'm clearing out what destroyed this family before I did.' By the third day, the house had completely changed. New locks were installed, the file cabinets were sealed, and all important documents were moved into a private safe at the law office. That noon, Vanessa packed her belongings. Her face was pale, makeup smudged, and her steps were heavy. She paused at the door, looked back at me, her voice tense. "You won. Are you happy now?" I replied softly. "I didn't win, Vanessa. I just protected what's right." She said nothing further, simply walking across the yard with her suitcase rolling over the stone path. The rain continued to fall as I stood on the porch watching her disappear into the mist. For a moment, I saw myself in that figure many years ago, young, proud, confident that I knew everything. But Vanessa was different. She chose deception, and that path always leads to loneliness. I returned to the study and sat in Robert's chair. Harold called. "It's done, Eileen. Everything has been organized. No one can now access your assets." I responded quietly, "Good. But don't lock it down too tightly. I don't want to turn this house into a fortress. All I seek is peace." Harold chuckled. "You really are like Robert. He often said, 'Winning the war is one thing, maintaining peace afterwards is the real challenge.'" When the call ended, I sat quietly for a long time. The room still carried the scent of old wood mixed with the rain on the porch. Soft light illuminated our wedding photo on the shelf, where Robert and I were laughing in a garden many years ago. I spoke to him softly, almost like a confession. "Everything is back in place, Robert. I've done it. But you know, when the house is so silent, I can feel the emptiness." Outside, the rain grew heavier. I closed my eyes and listened to the rain running over the roof. Feeling both relief and sadness, I understood that those 72 hours weren't just about regaining control. They marked the moment I let go of my last illusions about family. I had fought with reason, with evidence, and with the law. But deep down, I was still a mother, holding on to the hope that someday, once the fever of ambition subsides, they will find their way back to me. I picked up my cold tea and stepped onto the porch. The late winter rain brushed against my cheek with a chilly breath. Part of me had shut down, but another part was opening, like the new front door on this house, closing the past while still being open to something better ahead. I smiled softly and whispered, not sure if it was to myself or to the man in the photograph on the wall. The struggle is currently on hold, Robert, yet I sense it's not truly over. Less than a week after Vanessa left the house, another storm rolled in. That morning, I was outside tending the roses on the porch when Harold called. His voice was rough and slow. Eileen, prepare yourself. Vanessa has just hired her own lawyer. She has filed a complaint with the state, accusing you of forging the will and committing financial fraud. I paused for a few moments, put down the pruning shears, and listened to the wind scraping against the roof. I wasn't surprised that someone like Vanessa wouldn't give up as long as she still had a weapon, even a dull one. I spoke softly. All right, Harold, you know what we need to do. 2 days later, the local newspaper picked up the story. The Seattle Chronicle ran a bold headline on the front page: Widow 68 suspected of forging will and seizing late husband's multi-million-dollar estate. The photo they printed was of me at the funeral, red-eyed, gripping a handkerchief, standing beside Robert's casket. Below it was Vanessa's picture, impeccably groomed and tears in her eyes, the image of a wronged daughter-in-law. As always, the newspaper seemed to choose the side that appeared more plausible, with tears that looked easier to believe. I made some tea and read the entire article from start to finish. I wasn't angry or upset, just feeling hollow. It's strange how easily people can distort love and truth with just a few words. Harold came by that afternoon. He placed a thick file on the table, its cover marked clearly with bold letters. Rebuttal evidence. Don't worry, Eileen, he said steadily but confidently. Everything is part of the plan. I opened the file and saw still images from hidden cameras. Vanessa meeting Robert's former notary, passing over a cash envelope, her voice crisp and steady. All you need to do is confirm he signed. I will take care of everything else. Harold looked up at me. Well, I'll file this video along with the court's records, not just to dismiss the charges, but to put an end to this matter. I nodded. Outside, the rain hit the glass steadily, like a metronome marking what was to come. 3 days later, the first hearing took place. The courtroom was filled with reporters. Camera flashes burst continuously. I entered wearing a gray coat, my hair neatly pinned back. I could hear the whispers. That's her. She doesn't look like a con artist. Who knows? Wealthy older people often have their own tricks. Vanessa sat on the opposite side, dressed in a tight black dress with a heavy makeup. When she saw me, she offered a mocking smile, the same one that once made me question myself. Now it only made me feel a cold chill. Her attorney rose, voice sharp and clear. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Turner forged her husband's signature and conspired with attorney Harold Jenkins to take control of the entire estate. My client, Mrs. Vanessa Turner, only wants to see fairness restored. I looked at Harold. He nodded once and stood up, his voice even. Your Honor, we present video evidence showing that Mrs. Vanessa Turner bribed a notary to create a false will. Moreover, all the original documents belonging to Mr. Robert Turner, filed with the Washington State Court, confirm that his assets were legally transferred to his rightful widow, Mrs. Eileen Turner. 14 months before his passing, the courtroom fell silent. Harold put the footage on a large screen. It showed Vanessa handing money to a man in a gray coat, her voice unmistakable. Murmurs spread through the room. Vanessa's face turned pale and she screamed, No, that's fabricated. She set me up. Her lawyer fumbled, flipping through paper with nothing to say. The judge banged the gavel. An order was given for a 10-minute recess. While everyone stood, I remained seated. Vanessa glared at me with fire in her eyes. You'll pay. I'll make sure you lose everything. Do you hear me? I looked straight at her voice as I spoke. You can't steal what you never built, Vanessa. She lunged forward to say more, but the bailiff held her back, her face twisted with tears streaming through her makeup. When the judge returned, the proceedings ended swiftly. After examining the evidence, the court dismissed all charges against Mrs. Eileen Turner. The court also warned Mrs. Vanessa Turner for perjury and attempting to bribe a witness. Harold gave me a quiet, brief smile. I nodded in response and thanked him. Outside the courthouse, the midday sun cast its rays on the stone steps. Reporters crowded around, microphones aimed at me. Mrs. Turner, do you have any comments about the case? I paused, looked into a camera, and spoke slowly. There's nothing to say. I'll only remind you of one thing. Justice doesn't need any embellishments. It only requires the truth. Behind me, Vanessa cried out sharply, her voice breaking. I told her, I will take everything from you. You'll be begging me for mercy. Cameras shifted towards her. I glanced back once and spoke softly, just loud enough for the microphones to pick up. Forgiveness isn't a gift you have the right to give, Vanessa. Then I turned and walked away. That evening, as the news played on TV, I sat alone in the dimly lit living room with my tea cooling on the table. The screen displayed a familiar image, Vanessa being escorted out of her upscale downtown apartment in handcuffs. The report said she was charged with financial fraud, accused of stealing investor money through illegal transactions while running the company. The news anchor's tone was flat and serious, mentioning Vanessa Turner is being held while investigations continue. Police have confirmed multiple fraudulent transactions linked to Turner Holdings. I remained seated, watching her face. The once confident eyes appeared hollow, as empty as broken water. I didn't feel happiness, only a wave of tiredness. Ben arrived late, standing behind me. His voice wavered. Mom, I never thought it would come to this. Vanessa, she was mistaken, but I still loved her. I set down my cup and turned toward him. Love is not wrong, Ben. It's wrong when you love someone more than you love yourself. He bowed his head as tears traced down his face. I didn't hug him. I simply placed my hand on his shoulder, offering a silent kind of forgiveness. When the screen changed to commercials, I got up and moved to the window. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the sky was clearer. I saw my reflection in the glass. Every line on my face seemed to tell of the battles I had endured. I knew this would be the last time I would see her. Vanessa, even if only on television, had overturned herself with her own ambition. Robert used to say, when money is your ruler, you'll never know your true worth. I understood that better than anyone. I drew the curtains and spoke into the quiet. That's that, Robert. She ended it herself, and I can finally breathe. But right after I said it, I felt a slight tremor in my hands. Not fear or emptiness. When justice arrives, it doesn't bring happiness. It leaves a space for you to look into and see what was truly lost. I turned off the lights and walked down the long hallway, my footsteps echoing on the old wooden floor. Each step felt like a period and a goodbye. The fight with Vanessa was over, but the long journey back to peace had only just begun. After the case, my house returned to its quiet, old calm, the kind that wasn't heavy anymore, but light and clear. Like a morning after a hard rain, I started putting my life back in order. Little by little, without rushing or bitterness, I let go of old things, dingy curtains, smoke-stained fabrics, and chose brighter windows. Every morning, I opened the windows wide so the sunlight could fill the living room. It was something I had forgotten to do for years. The backyard was still there, the garden Robert used to care for, although weeds had started to grow among the plants. I rolled up my sleeves, put on gloves, and began trimming each bed. Every cut through a dead branch felt like tidying up pieces of memory. Neighbors stopped by to say hello. Mrs. Wilson from across the street brought over a homemade apple pie and offered a warm smile. I noticed the papers. Finally, some sense of fairness, right, Mrs. Turner? I responded softly. Fairness isn't something that just happens on its own. It's something you hold on to when everyone else lets it go. In the days that followed, my life moved slowly and peacefully. I relearned mornings without arguments. When the sun rose, I made coffee and sat on the porch, reading Robert's old letters. Some pages had turned yellow with age. His slanted handwriting still felt warm to me. If one day you ever feel lonely, replant the garden. Where there's fragrance, there's hope. I did just that. The old rose bush returned, blooming again. New lavender took root, green and vibrant. When the wind blew, the scent reminded me that Robert still felt present in every breath I took inside the house. Later one day, Mark appeared. He stood by the gate for a long time, as if he couldn't bring himself to step inside. When I finally opened the door, he only softly said, "Mom, I want to apologize." I looked at my son, the boy who grew up in this kitchen and did his homework at the table Robert had built. Now he was a grown man, with a touch of gray at his temples, yet in his eyes I saw the same childlike fear. I didn't say much, I simply opened the door wider. "Come in, Mark. This house was never locked to you." We sat at the dining table. He looked around the room. I realized I was wrong to side with Vanessa. I had thought you were making things difficult for her, but in truth, you were just trying to protect yourself. I responded gently. "No, Mark. I was protecting this family even if you didn't see it." He lowered his head. Tears gently slid onto his hands. I didn't need more apologies. That look in his eyes was enough. A few weeks later, Amy called. Her voice trembled as she spoke over the phone. "Mom, can I stop by just to share a meal with you?" When she arrived, I prepared Robert's favorite stew. During dinner, she didn't bring up money or the case. We simply talked about everyday things: the roses on the porch, Mrs. Wilson's cat, and the approaching winter. When I placed some vegetables on her plate, she held my hand and her eyes grew moist. I missed Dad, and I missed the mom I used to know. I smiled warmly but firmly. I am still that mom, Amy. The only difference is that now I know how to protect myself. Ben was the last to come. One afternoon, I heard a car in the driveway. He stepped out, his shirt wrinkled and his face thinner. "I came to return the key," he said, handing me the old house key. "Vanessa has been convicted. I'm looking for work again, if you can forgive me." I took his hand gently, my voice calm and soft as a breath. "There's nothing to forgive. I just want you to understand that happiness can't be built on someone else's pain." He nodded, his eyes red with emotion, then pulled me into a tight hug. It was small and awkward, but I knew it meant he had come back. One by one, my children returned, not with presents or money, but with feelings of regret and thankfulness. I did not mention the will, the possessions, or the court case. I focused on trust. I told them how their father began with nothing but determination, and that the most precious thing he left behind wasn't a house or money. It was integrity. Integrity, I explained gently, is the one thing no one can divide into parts or steal away. One morning, I went to Harold's office. He looked surprised when I brought in a stack of papers. "What are you planning now, Eileen?" he asked. I smiled. Not another legal matter. I want to start a scholarship." He raised an eyebrow. "A scholarship, yes. In Robert Turner's name? For young people who have made mistakes but want a new beginning." He always said, "Everyone gets lost sometimes as long as they find their way back." I want to honor that promise. Harold nodded, genuine respect evident in his eyes. "Mrs. Turner, I believe that's the best way to bring this story to an end." I answered softly, still smiling. "I don't want to end it, Harold. I want to start again, this time without anyone being harmed." News about the scholarship spread quickly. Neighbors, former coworkers, friends from the company sent their congratulations. They visited with flowers, cakes, and words of thanks. Everyone said, "Mrs. Turner, you're so strong." I simply smiled, calm and steady, not strong. I'm just too tired to be weak anymore. The late afternoon, I sat beside the newly blooming garden. The sunset poured over the roof, washing the lavender in gold. I closed my eyes and listened to the sparrows on the fence, to the breath of the earth, the wind, and myself. In my heart, a familiar voice, Robert's, rose, warm as ever. "You see, we won in the end, but not because of money," I answered aloud, as if to him. "Yes, Robert, we did. But this victory isn't about revenge. It's about holding on to the goodness in us." Even when everything else seemed to break apart, I opened my eyes to a clear sky. Pale yellow clouds drifted gently at the edges. Morning would come again just as it always does, but this time I knew I would face it with a different spirit. No heaviness, no resentment, only gratitude. I smiled and quietly said, "Thank you, Robert. You showed me that true justice isn't found in the courtroom, it's in how we live after the storm." Time kept moving, slow and steady, like a leaf drifting at dawn. I found a new rhythm. No more disputes, no more phones ringing with threats or demands, just me, a peaceful house, and old habits returning. Each morning, I made a cup of black coffee, taking in its deep aroma. Robert loved that moment. I played Miles Davis, allowing jazz to fill the kitchen. I read by the window, the sunlight pouring through the curtains onto the pages softened with age. And in that moment, loneliness no longer felt frightening. It was no longer empty. It was a space where I could breathe, live, think, and feel that I still existed. I started journaling again, not to complain, but to remember. To remember that I had walked through the storm and was still standing. I wrote about cold nights with the wind howling through the house, about the fears of betrayal, and how I found my footing once more in silence. Each entry felt like therapy. Sometimes I thought, if anyone ever reads this, perhaps they will see that even in pain there is light if you refuse to bow your head. One early spring morning, Harold called. His voice was calm and deep as ever, but with something new in it. "Eileen, you haven't been out in a while. I would like to invite you to the scholarship gala for the Robert Turner Fund. Many people want to meet you." I laughed. "I'm just a person behind the fund. Who would want to meet a widow?" He responded gently and confidently, "Not a widow, the woman who reminds the city that justice still exists." I paused for a moment before I said, "I'll come." That evening, I wore a deep blue dress. The shade Robert described made me think of moonlight with shape. As I entered the hall, warm light reflected off the glass walls, creating a softness I had not felt in a long time. The music was jazz again, but this time it was lively and uplifting, like the rhythm of those who have fallen but chose to rise again. Harold greeted me at the door, as courteous as ever. He slightly bowed and extended his hand. "You're here. I knew you wouldn't miss it." I smiled and took his hand. It was still steady and warm, but it didn't remind me of love. Instead, it brought to mind trust, a special kind of connection between people who have weathered storms together. Inside the hall, more than 100 guests filled the space. They were students and individuals who had received scholarships from the Robert Turner Fund. Some brought flowers, while others came with only their gratitude. Harold stepped onto the stage, took the microphone, said a few opening words, then turned to me. "Now, I believe we all want to hear from Mrs. Eileen Turner." I stood. The applause lasted longer than I expected. I walked up to the stage, my heart beating slowly but steadily. Under the bright lights, I saw many faces, some familiar, some strangers. A few reporters were present, but this time no one pointed a camera as a weapon. They simply listened. I looked down at the microphone, then spoke softly, clearly, and calmly. I wasn't here to share a sad story. I wanted to talk about trust, the fragile thing people lose most easily when they are hurt. The room grew quiet. I continued. "I used to believe that family was the safest place, until one day the people I loved most turned away. They took my trust and almost stole my dignity." I paused, looked down, then spoke more deliberately. But I didn't choose revenge out of anger. Instead, I decided to respond with intelligence, with justice, and with measured silence. I didn't want to teach them to fear me. I wanted to show them how to respect me. Those words weren't just a speech, they were the truth, like a scar spoken aloud, without pain. I spoke about Robert, who taught me that strength isn't about power, but about staying true to yourself in difficult times. I mentioned Harold, the man who stood beside me when others turned away, and I shared my own story of a woman who once fell apart and shook with fear, yet never let it control her. When I finished, the room remained silent. Then applause erupted, strong and united. A few people stood, and gradually everyone else rose to their feet. Looking down, I saw they understood, not with pity or curiosity, but genuine comprehension. Harold returned to the stage and softly said into the microphone, "You just spoke for so many, especially those who have been treated unfairly. yet refused to lose their dignity. I smiled, my eyes a little moist. If my story can help someone believe they deserve to live with dignity, then all the pain I endured was worthwhile. When the program concluded, many people came forward to shake my hand. A young woman held my hand and said, "Miss Turner, my family rejected me for not being good enough. But after listening to you, I realize we don't need to be extraordinary to earn respect. We just need to be honest." I squeezed her hand gently and nodded. "That's correct. Honesty with yourself, that's where true strength begins." That evening, when I returned home, Seattle was shining with lights. The reflections on the lake looked like silver ribbons. I opened the door, took off my shoes, and hung up my coat. The house was quiet, but this time it didn't feel empty. I poured myself a glass of red wine, played soft music, and sat by the window. The evening breeze carried the scent of lavender from the backyard, flowing through the cool air. I looked up at the sky. There was no moon, only a sky full of stars. A strange feeling grew inside me. It was freedom, not the freedom of someone without commitments, but the freedom of someone who has gone through every connection and chosen to stay true to herself. I whispered softly, as if to Robert, as if to my own life. "I am no longer afraid of being alone, Robert, because I now see that sometimes loneliness is the most peaceful form of freedom." A year after that evening event, Seattle welcomed spring with bright blue skies and green leaves starting to grow. I turned 69 more slowly, but I remain just as strong. After everything I've been through, life has shown me the genuine strength is not measured by muscles or money. It comes from a calm and honest heart. I completed a project I had been working on for quite some time, the Turner Trust for Women Over 60. The name sounds simple, but to me, it represents what remains of a lifetime: love, fairness, and kindness. The trust was set up to help older women who have been left behind, manipulated, or hurt by their own families. Women like me who once sat alone in a dark room, wondering if they still mattered. Harold assisted with the legal work alongside a group of dedicated young attorneys. He said, "Eileen, this is the best way to turn pain into a lasting legacy. From now on, your name won't just be in court records, it will stand for hope in people's hearts." I smiled gently and replied softly, "I don't need my name remembered, Harold. I just want those women to know they're not alone." On the day the fund was launched, the air felt fresh and clear. The small lobby at Turner and Coach was decorated with Lavender Roberts' favorite flowers. I stood behind the podium with a microphone, addressing dozens of women, their hair silvered but their eyes still shining with life. I spoke slowly, as if talking to myself. A year earlier, I believed my life was finished. But then I understood that as long as we have the ability to choose how to face life's challenges, there is still a chance to start anew. The Turner Fund wasn't created to rescue anyone, but to restore the right to stand tall once more. The applause was gentle and heartfelt. I saw tears in a few eyes, not out of pity, but because they understood. After the ceremony, I sat with Harold to go over the list of the operating team. Out of the blue, Mark entered, carrying a folder. "If you agree," he said, humble, "I'd like to handle the funds and financial management. I work in banking and I can ensure the money goes to the right places." I looked at my son, feeling both touched and relieved. "Good, Mark. I trust you. And this is how you start putting things right. Not with an apology, but through action." He nodded slowly, eyes filled with determination. Amy took on the communications role, and Ben, after a long, quiet pause, volunteered to lead the counseling. I was taken aback. "When did you study psychology, Ben?" He gave a small, shy smile. "After Vanessa was arrested, I started therapy. I realized how weak I'd been. Now I want to help others, not repeat my mistakes." That moment warmed me inside, not because they had succeeded, but because they had finally grown up. The house that once echoed with anger and regret is now filled with laughter, the sound of clinking dishes, and the inviting aroma of baking from the kitchen. I looked around. It's still the same house, but seen in a different light. In the afternoons, I often sat by the office window where Robert once drafted the company's very first plan. Next to me were new papers, not financial reports, but my new will. It took me nearly 3 weeks to write each word. I didn't leave wealth as a reward, but as a lesson. I carefully wrote, "This estate is not for division. It is for connection. Those who use it to help others will gain more. Those who use it to harm others will lose. Because the most important thing I learned wasn't how to hold on to money, but how to keep my heart. When I finished the last line, a tear fell, not out of sadness, but out of peace. I closed the file and placed it in the safe. Before locking it, I whispered softly to myself, everything that's mine now becomes a lesson for my children. I was sure Robert would agree. He told me the year we were married, money is just a tool, Eileen. What you leave behind in the world depends on how you live. That afternoon, I carried a chair out into the garden. The late afternoon sun poured down like honey, turning the lavender I had replanted a year earlier into a shade of gold. A gentle breeze carried the scent of damp earth and the melody of bird songs along the fence. I sat there with a cup of tea, watching the sun sink behind the rooftops. In my heart, Robert's familiar voice emerged, steady and warm as always. You'll know what to do, just like always. I smiled quietly in response. I did, Robert. And this time, not just for us, but for other women too. I looked up at the violet edge of dusk, spreading calm and bright. A small bird crossed the sky, its shadow passing through the last glow of daylight. I realized I no longer felt lonely. Things were no longer losses. They had become continuations. I held onto a simple belief. Somewhere out there, other women would open their doors on a quiet morning and find their strength from a fun named Turner, from my story, from a woman once betrayed who didn't give up. I set my cup down and slowly stood up. Twilight had arrived, and the first stars shone in the sky. I smiled softly and allowed the breeze to gently move my silver hair. In the end, I whispered to myself, I kept the assets, the dignity, and the peace. In that moment, in a garden filled with fragrance and soft light, I realized I wasn't just a survivor of storms. I was someone who had left a legacy of resilience. I completed my story at 68, an age many see as a time to rest. But for me, it marked the beginning of another chapter. I no longer held on to anger or questions of why things happened, or if only. What I carried was gratitude for the hurts that awakened me, the losses that taught me how to stand tall, and the lonely days that showed me how to love myself. Every morning, when I open the window and see the flowers blossoming, I know more clearly than ever that I am on the right path. Loss does not weaken us. Instead, it guides us to look inward and recognize that we deserve to live more fully. I used to be a woman who aimed to please others, believing that sacrifice was the highest expression of love. Now I understand that true love does not require us to disappear so someone else can feel comfortable. I have experienced deception and betrayal, even being pushed out of my own home, but I rose again, not to seek revenge, but to reclaim the truth within myself. Sometimes I still think of Robert and the things he said under the rain. No one can make you feel small unless you believe you are. Now I smile when I remember, because I have finally come to truly understand it. Life is not always gentle, but I believe it is fair in its own way. Fairness does not mean returning everything exactly as it was. It means having enough strength to find peace within your heart, regardless of the cracks that may surround you. I look back on the journey from a house filled with conflict to a garden shining with light. From someone who was pushed aside to becoming the founder of a fund that helps hundreds find their voices. I held onto my assets, my dignity, and my peace. But most importantly, I held on to myself. I want to share a small message for anyone listening. Never let anyone make you feel worthless, especially in your own home. If you are being ignored, silenced, or treated as if you no longer matter, remember you still have the right to stand tall, keep your voice, and live life on your own terms. It's never too late to start over. I have shown that myself. If I, a widow who was once thrown out of the home I built, could begin anew, then so can you. Believe me, strength does not only come with youth, it comes from a heart that refuses to give in. I still sit by the window and watch the late afternoon sun drift over the lavender that Robert planted. A gentle breeze carries his scent, a quiet reminder that he's nearby, watching over each of my steps. In my heart, I hear his voice. warm, deep, steady, echoing softly. You will always know how to do the right thing. I answer with a gentle, slow smile. Yes, Robert, I did. Not just for myself, but for many others as well. I rest my hand on a new notebook where I write the stories of women who come to the Turner Trust. Every line in their letters reminds me that strength can be passed down, even from a heart that has been broken. I am no longer afraid of being alone. I've learned to live with solitude, even to be thankful for it. Because in those quiet moments, I discovered freedom. Looking back now, I only want to say two words: thank you. Thank you to life for testing me so I could realize my resilience. Thank you to Robert for leaving me a trust in what is right. Thank you to the wounds that forced me to grow, and to myself for not giving up when everyone else turned away. I know there are women out there like me, once dismissed and silent just to keep peace in their own homes. If you are listening to this, please keep in mind that no one has the right to make you feel that you are worthless. You still deserve love, respect, and a life that belongs to you. If my story has helped you see yourself clearly, please leave a comment. Even a simple message like "I understand" will let me know you're still out there, still standing, still holding on to hope and believing in the good. Thank you for walking with me all the way to the end of this journey. If you feel someone else might need to hear this, please like, subscribe, and share. That way they will know that regardless of our age, we can rise again and find our own peace.